Seguimos.
My name is Penelope Ward.
¿Qué tal ha ido?
I am
El primer
35
bloque.
years old,
Estoy
and the night my family
cansadísima.
finally looked at me like I mattered was the same night they had already
¿Qué
decided
os
I was not
pasa?
worth showing up
Estoy muy
for.
cansada, chiquillos. Creo
A
que tendría
few
que haber
hours
tomado
before the
café en
ceremony,
realidad.
I stared at our family group
Estoy que
chat
me
with my
caigo.
thumb hovering over the
Joder,
screen,
pero ahora ya son
telling
las
myself
5. Ahora
not
sí
to
que no puedo
overthink
tomar
it,
café.
not to read
Voy
too
a
much into
aguantar como
silence,
pueda. Voy
not
a
to want
aguantar
this so
como una
badly.
jabata.
I
¿No
typed,
descansaste?
"Tonight is a huge night for me.
Más
I
o
am
menos,
receiving a
Tony, pero
major
creo que es
award in
porque estoy
Washington.
acostumbrada a
I would really
tomar,
love for you all to come."
a tomar
For a
café
moment, I
a
let myself
mediodía,
believe that
como mucho
maybe
a
this
las
time would
3.
be different.
Y hoy he dicho, no
Maybe
voy a
this time
tomar
they would understand
para
that
ver
what
qué
I had
pasa.
built,
Para ver si
what I had
aguanto
sacrificed,
mejor.
what
O
I
sea,
had
si duermo
spent
mejor por
years
la
fighting
noche o
for
si hay
was
algún cambio,
real.
porque también estoy
Then
como
the
con un
first
poquito de
reply came
ansiedad
in,
estas
fast and sharp
noches.
enough to
Y
cut
quería
straight
probar a
through
ver qué
me.
pasa, pero claro, el
My
cuerpo me
sister
está
said they did
pidiendo
not have time for my
cafeína
stupid Meaningless award.
y no se lo estoy
My
dando.
father
Y
answered
no
with
le
a
está
thumbs
haciendo ni
up,
puñetera
like
gracia.
that settled everything.
Por
My
cierto,
mother followed with a
hablando
message
de ni
saying they would
puñetera
rather
gracia,
spend the evening together over a
sí,
warm family
muchas
dinner.
gracias por
I
tus
read all 3
bits,
messages
aunque
without
nos has dado
blinking.
un buen susto.
No
A mí no ha
anger,
sido tanto susto,
no
sino
argument,
confusión.
no begging.
Así como otras
I just typed
veces,
back,
hippie el otro día,
understood. That one
instincionera,
word was the
bienvenida,
quietest
bienvenido.
thing I had ever
Así como
sent
el otro
them.
día,
And somehow it
hippie
carried
me
the
dio un
weight of
susto de
every
muerte
disappointment that had come
con
before it.
su cosa.
What they did not
Esto no me ha
know
dado
was that
susto, pero de
later that
repente ha
night,
sido de
while
dónde
they were
viene este
sitting
sonido,
comfortably at
como que no
dinner,
entendía nada.
the country would hear
Para
my
los que estéis
name,
cansados, mi
cameras would
recomendación es que
find
os
my
paséis
face,
por la
and the
cafetería.
same family who dismissed
Por la
my biggest
cafetería
moment would watch it unfold on
de
national
Discord.
television in complete silence. If you have
Ay,
ever been
chiquillos,
treated like the
qué
least
cansancio.
important person in your own home,
Es que
then you already
tengo
know this
Discord cerrado,
story
ni
does
siquiera lo había
not
abierto.
really begin
Belén,
at that
buenas
dinner table.
tardes. ¿Cómo
It
estás,
began
chiquita?
years
Yo me
earlier,
acabo de
in a
despertar,
family where I was
Exus, ¿qué me
always
dices?
expected to
¿Pero qué
achieve
hora es allí?
quietly and disappear
¿O te
just as
despiertas de la
quietly
siesta?
after. I grew up in Carmel, Indiana, in a house where everything
¿Cómo
bright
así?
seemed to orbit around
Se me
my
está
older
abriendo
sister.
Discord,
She
¿eh?
was the easy one to
Estoy viendo, a
celebrate,
ver.
the kind of girl people noticed the
El
second she walked
personaje de...
into a room.
Uy, me va
She was
esto...
beautiful in that effortless,
Es que no
camera-ready
puede.
way,
Mi ordenador cada
confident,
día va peor.
funny
Cada
when she
segundo
wanted
que
to
pasa,
be, and
más cerca
always
de la
surrounded by
muerte. ¿Qué es
attention that
esto?
seemed to
¿Eres una
follow
rata,
her
Dori?
like
¿Eres
perfume.
una rata?
My parents loved both of us,
¿Qué es esto?
at least in the
Bertunche?
technical sense of the word.
Pero de verdad, ¿por
But
qué tiene
love
tanto tiempo
inside a
libre
family
esta
does not
persona?
always arrive in equal proportions, and
Solo de hoy,
children
mi
know
amor,
that
narices,
long
rain
before
o
adults
cosita,
are
tú
willing to
sabes que yo
admit
te
it.
amo con todo mi
In
corazón.
our
Es
house,
que más
Sabrina was the
tonto.
story, and
Eres
I
una
was
rata, Dori.
usually the
Pero que te ha
useful
hecho
side
Dori,
note.
¿eh?
If a
La
teacher
pobre.
praised my grades, my parents would
De
smile
verdad.
and say they were proud.
Dori,
Then somehow
es
the
que...
conversation would
Es
drift
que...
right back to
Qué
Sabrina's
paciencia.
social life,
¿Qué paciencia
her
tenemos? O sea,
plans, her
necesitamos
outfits,
un
her latest
reconocimiento
obsession.
por
If
soportar
I
lo que
won something at
soportamos.
school, it
Ay,
was
apa.
treated like a nice little
Susto Express,
detail.
¿esto qué
If she
es?
got invited
Está la
somewhere,
Garda.
it became
Garda
the
de
event
Gardi,
of the
la había
week.
visto yo por aquí, me
I
parece.
learned early that there
Y
was a
Charles,
difference
buenas
between
tardes.
being
Recién
loved
desperté,
and
ojalá.
being seen.
Ojalá,
And I
recién
was not the
despertar.
one people really looked at.
Yo no le dije Sarif,
While
fui
other
yo.
girls my age were hanging
Yo
posters on
llamé...
their walls,
Puede
I
ser
was
el otro día
teaching
en el
myself how to
juego, ¿no?
code on an old
Puede ser en
laptop I
plantitas,
bought
que la
with
llamara
babysitting
rata.
money.
Ya, Dori, es
I
que
liked the
fuiste muy
logic of
rata.
it.
En realidad
The
sí,
way
¿eh?
computers did
Tengo
not
que
care
decir
whether you were charming
que
or
sí, en ese
loud or
momento sí,
easy
pero
to
solo se lo
love.
puedo decir yo.
Either something
Albertunche.
worked or it did not. I built a small
Es un clip
scheduling app
viejo.
for high school
El
students
Susto
before I was
Express,
old
esto yo
enough
creo
to
que es
drive.
del
And
otro
when it
día.
actually started getting
Creo que fue lo
downloaded
de
by
hippie
kids
esto.
outside my school
Ya
district,
no lo sé.
I remember bringing my laptop downstairs with
La
this
imagen y el texto son
ridiculous
tuyos.
excitement in my
Ah, ya
chest,
sé cuál es.
thinking maybe this would
¿Cómo
finally be the
aprovecha?
thing that made
Está
my family
Albertunche.
pay attention.
Casualmente siempre
My
coge
mother
clips
barely looked up from
míos
helping Sabrina
insultando a
get ready for a
gente,
photo shoot.
míos
My
con
father said,
connotaciones sexuales
"That's nice,
solamente
honey,"
en su
without
cabeza,
asking a single
o
question.
míos
My
recortando
sister
como
laughed and
casi
said,
una sílaba
"You
para que
really need to
parezca que
stop
estoy
acting
diciendo
like
algo
your little
positivo de
computer
él.
projects are
Eso es
changing the
el patrón
world."
de Albertunche
Everyone
y sus
chuckled like she had
clips.
made some harmless joke,
Ay,
and
voy
I
a beber
stood
agua.
there
Es
smiling
un
with my
cretino.
laptop in my hands like an
Oye,
idiot
Posita, me acuerdo
until
que
I
antes
finally
hacías
carried it back
meditaciones y
upstairs.
cosas así en los
That kind of
breaks.
thing happened
Bueno,
so
eso de que
often
antes
it
hacía
stopped feeling
meditaciones con Pablo,
surprising
o sea, quizás
and
hice
started feeling
1 o 2
normal.
meditaciones
I
como
was the
prueba.
one who fixed fix the
No sé
Wi-Fi
si
when it
eso
broke,
basta
the one
para
teachers called responsible, the one
asentar
neighbors
la
described as
meditación en
mature,
este stream.
the one adults trusted. But none of that came with excitement. It came with
Pero sí,
convenience.
creo que una vez lo hice.
I was
De hecho,
appreciated in the
pero
way
esto
people
hace igual
appreciate a
4
smoke
años.
detector.
Lo hice haciendo yo
Quietly,
misma la meditación.
briefly,
Y luego,
mostly when
quizás
something
otra
goes
vez lo
wrong.
hice
When I got
poniendo
into
una de
Stanford
YouTube.
with a scholarship that should have
Y
changed the
otra
energy
vez,
of the
me
entire
acuerdo, ¿os
house,
acordáis
my
cuando yo me
mother's first
descargué
response was
un
to ask whether
programa
the move would
que
interfere with Sabrina's
modificaba
brand
la
event
voz
that
para que
weekend
pareciera
because she wanted
ASMR?
family pictures
Yo con
before I
toda la
left? At
ilusión
dinner that
que la
night, we
descargué
somehow spent
y
more time
luego
talking
lo
about
instalé,
Sabrina's
no me
sponsored
hice.
trip to
Y
Miami
luego
than
me
the fact
decís que
that
se
I
escuchaba
had just
fatal.
earned one of the biggest opportunities of my life. I remember sitting there cutting into overcooked
El
chicken,
tenedor de
listening
Poseidón
to
a
them
que hace
plan her
referencia.
outfits,
Se me olvidó.
and feeling something
Charles, el
inside me
símbolo de
become
la
very
psicología.
still,
Por
not
favor,
broken,
por favor,
not
a esas
dramatic,
alturas.
just still.
Quiero canjeo de
That was the
meditación
night
en
I began to
ASMR
understand
ya.
that if I
¿No
wanted a
les
life that felt
gustó?
like mine,
Si yo lo
I would have to
hice.
build it far
Y os
away
hice
from the people who
ASMR.
had
De
already
hecho, había un
decided what role
canjeo
I was allowed
que
to
era
play.
2 minutos
So
de
I left
ASMR.
Indiana with 2
Entonces yo
suitcases,
activaba
a
este
scholarship,
programa que me
and
llevaba
the
un
kind
rato
of
activarlo porque
ambition
había
that
que hacer
only
no sé
grows
cuántas
in
cosas.
people who have spent
Y os
years
hablaba
being
durante 2 minutos
underestimated in their
en voz
own
bajita,
homes.
muy tipo
Stanford felt like the
ASMR.
first place in my
Lo
life
quiero en
where
el
I
canal
did
de
not have
JP.
to shrink myself to keep other
Oye,
people
ASMR
comfortable.
Manpa.
For the
¿No te es
first
suficiente
time,
con el
being
mío?
serious
Ok.
was not something people teased me
Juan Pablo,
for.
es cierto,
Being
deberías
obsessed with
hacer
solving
un
problems was not treated like some
un
strange personality
canjeo
flaw.
de ASMR.
It was
Yo
useful
creo que lo
there.
haces bien.
It was
Yo creo que la
respected.
meditación ejercicio de
I studied
respiración estaría
computer
bueno.
engineering and data systems,
O sea, lo puedo
and I
poner
worked
si lo queréis,
harder
pero
than
yo qué
I
sé.
had ever
Pero sí,
worked
lo
in my
puedo poner.
life,
Miguel,
not
buenas
because
tardes, ya te
anyone
estoy
was pushing
saludando.
me,
Y
but
Miguel,
because
no
I
se me olvida.
finally
Lo que
understood what it
pasa
felt
que
like to be
sí,
in a
estamos en
place where
focus,
effort
que
could
es momento de
actually
estudiar.
turn
Yo
into
tengo
momentum.
minimizado todo. Entonces,
While
por
other
mucho que me
students
pongas,
went to
que
football
te
games
salude en
and
el
weekend
chat.
trips,
Por mucho
I
que me lo
spent long
destaques en
nights in
morado. Yo
computer
no te leo,
labs,
pero
running
no porque
simulations,
no te quiera leer,
cleaning
sino
data,
porque yo lo tengo
fixing
minimizado.
broken
Porque
models,
estamos
and
trabajando
teaching
en el
myself
otro blog.
things that were not even part of my
Pero muy buenas
classes yet.
tardes, he visto por ahí.
I
Bueno,
did
creo que te vas
internships,
ahora, ¿no?
joined research teams,
Creo que
and
tenías
learned very
ahora
quickly that the world outside my
psiquiatra.
family was full
Me
of
parece que he
people
leído por
who
ahí a
did
las
not need
5.
me to be
Y
charming
muchas
in order to
gracias.
take
Mañana
me
tengo exámenes,
seriously.
¿verdad? A
They
las
just
7 de la
needed me to
tarde.
be good,
Me
and
da
I
miedo
was.
olvidarme. Como que de
After
repente yo me
graduation,
vaya
I moved to
de aquí a
Denver and
hacer
took a
cosas
job in
y que esté
transportation analytics,
tan
which sounds
metida en el tema
boring
con lo de
until
mis
you
cejas
realize
que lo
how
tengo
many
mañana,
lives
que se
depend
me
on
olvide
roads working the way they
que
are supposed
tengo
to.
examen.
Most people do not
Ya
think
podemos
about
insultar
traffic
por el chat,
systems
me
until
parece
something
bien.
goes wrong,
La verdad que sí,
until a
podéis hacer lo
highway
que
locks
queráis,
up during an
pero tened cuidado que si
evacuation,
estén por ahí,
until a
saca la
storm hits
espada
faster than
y os quedéis sin
expected,
cabeza.
until one bad
Y empieza
decision
el
turns
break
a
de
backup
JP.
into a disaster.
¿Quién quiere el break
I
de
thought about
JP?
those things
Por
all the
favor,
time.
¿a quién le
A
interesa
few
ese
years
break?
later, I
¿Quién
helped
es
launch a
JP
company
en
focused on
esta vida?
predictive emergency
Oye,
routing,
Garda, me gusta cómo
and
te ves
that work
hoy.
eventually became the center of my
Garda no
entire
está en
life.
Discord.
We built a platform that
Garda
could
está en
combine
el
live
Discord de
traffic flow,
Juan Pablo.
weather conditions, road
Pero
closure
Garda, ¿quién
reports,
solo es
and
este?
emergency alerts
Mira,
fast enough to help cities direct
Rafaela,
people away from danger
Garda,
before panic made
Felipe.
everything worse.
Solo me
It was
falta ver a
not
Dori
flashy work.
ahí en la
It
llamada.
was not the
¿Qué es
kind of thing
esto?
that fit neatly into a
Belén,
cute social media
Belén,
caption,
que te den.
but it mattered. During a
Gracias, aunque me da
major
pena. Me
flood
gusta
season
mucho
in the
este súper,
Midwest,
pero tengo
our
un
system
agujero.
helped county teams
Garda, pues
redirect
cóselo.
drivers away from
Tú no sabes
dangerous
coser,
highway
Gardi,
sections before
pero que no
conditions
había
turned
nadie en el
deadly.
tuyo.
During a winter
Eso le
pileup
dices
risk
tú a
on a major
todos.
interstate,
Flemity.
our
Me
alerts
voy a
helped
Discord de
reduce
Juanpa también.
congestion
O
in
sea,
exactly the
pescado.
areas first
No estoy
responders were
ni yo
trying to keep
en mi
clear.
Discord. También se me había
The
olvidado
more the
entrar.
system
No
improved,
había
the
nadie.
more
Ya.
agencies started paying
Ni va a
attention.
haber nadie.
The more
Vale.
people paid
Ya me he
attention,
enfadado y
the
hoy no
more my
entra
life
Discord.
turned into a blur of
Menos
airport
si
coffee,
veo a
late-night
Isma. A
calls,
veces veo a Isma ahí
unanswered
solito.
texts,
Me da tanta
and work
ternura.
that
Y
followed me
entonces
into
quiero estar
every
con él.
room I entered.
Estaba Manu
And
antes.
still, for
No había
reasons I probably
Manu.
should have let go of years earlier,
Manu
I kept
estaba.
trying to share
Pero Manu
pieces
no
of
está
it
aquí
with my
ahora en el
family.
chat.
I would call
Me
home
tenía
and
abierto
explain
Discord.
that our pilot
Es
program
que
had just
no lo tenía.
expanded,
No lo
that
tenía
a
abierto
state
porque se me ha olvidado.
transportation
Es
office
que
wanted
me
a
he
larger
entrado aquí
deployment,
a
that our team had
Isma.
spent weeks helping
Esta Isma.
emergency
Isma,
planners
ya voy
test
contigo.
routes before storm
Es que me está
season.
yendo tan mal últimamente
My mother would say that sounded stressful and
el
ask if I was
internet
eating enough.
que
My
creo que
father
si
would make
entro
a
a Discord
distracted
todavía me va
comment
peor.
about being
Mi
proud of
CPU,
me, then shift the
34% está
conversation
siendo
to something
ocupada.
Sabrina had posted online.
Le voy a preguntar a Juanpa
My
cuánto es lo
sister,
normal
who
porque
by
no lo
then
sé.
was living in
Ay,
Chicago
chiquillos,
and treating
tengo
her life like a permanent
mal sueño y
lifestyle
tengo hambre
campaign, would
para estas
laugh
cosas.
and say
He
things
comido un
like,
bocata hoy. Es
I
que
am
como he
sure it is
almorzado,
important,
me he
but
pedido un
honestly,
bocata
I
así de
have
grande
no
de
idea what you are
chivito.
talking
Que no sé
about.
si sabéis qué es el
Then
chivito,
she
pero
would
es
launch
un
into a
bocata
story
que
about a
lleva
rooftop
tomate,
event, a
lechuga,
hotel partnership,
mayonesa, pechuga,
a photographer,
huevo
a wine
y
brand,
no sé qué más.
some new
Y era
version
súper
of a
grande.
life that looked
Y
beautiful in pictures,
pensaba que
and
iba a tener
somehow
suficiente y
always
de hecho,
seemed
bueno, he
more
aguantado
interesting to my
bastante hasta ahora
parents than
sin
anything I
hambre,
had spent
pero ahora ya me
months
está
building.
entrando.
I
Pero es que
remember
en
one
50
call in
minutos tengo
particular
sesión, así
after
que
a
ya no voy a
long
comer
week
nada.
when
Así que
I
Dios,
was
venga, a
exhausted
estudiar,
enough to feel
muchísimo
honest.
ánimo, que vaya muy bien,
I
a darle
told them our
con
system
todo.
had helped
Me
support an
muteo y al
evacuation
día.
reroute during severe storm conditions, and before I could even finish explaining what happened, my sister said, "That sounds so intense." I could never care that much about traffic. Everyone laughed softly, including my mother, and I sat there with my phone against my ear, staring out at the lights of downtown Denver, realizing that they were never going to meet me where I actually lived. Not emotionally, not intellectually, not even out of simple curiosity. That was when something shifted in me for good. I stopped calling because I wanted them to understand. After that, I only called out of habit. By the time my work started reaching the federal level, I had already learned not to expect too much from my family. That lesson should have protected me, but hope has a way of surviving in people long after it has stopped making sense. The call came on a gray Tuesday morning while I was in the office reviewing a deployment report with my team. At first, I thought it was another media request or maybe a scheduling issue, but the moment I heard the voice on the other end introduce herself from Washington, everything around me seemed to go quiet. She told me I had been selected to receive the National Medal of Technology and Innovation for my work in public safety systems, for helping build technology that gave emergency teams and ordinary drivers better odds in moments when every second mattered. For a few seconds, I honestly could not speak. I just stood there with one hand pressed against the conference table, listening as she explained the ceremony details, the travel schedule, the protocol, the official notice that would be sent over by email. When I finally hung up, my team knew from my face that something huge had happened. The room exploded before I even got the words out. People were hugging me, shouting, crying, pounding on the table, asking if I was serious. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, I felt this strange ache rising in my chest because the first people I wanted to tell were the same people who had spent most of my life acting like my work was background noise. Still, I told myself this was different. This was not a school project, or a scholarship, or another thing they could politely ignore while waiting for my sister to do something louder. This was the White House. This was the kind of honor even people outside my field understood. So that afternoon, after the official email came through, and I had read it 3 times just to make sure I was not imagining any of it, I opened the family group chat and typed out a message more carefully than I should have. I wrote that I had just received life-changing news, that I was being honored in Washington, that the ceremony would be that week, and that it would mean a lot to me if they came. I added the time, the city, and even the note that it would be covered by national media in case attending felt inconvenient. Then I stared at the screen and waited. I did not have to wait long. Sabrina answered first, almost immediately, like she had been holding her response ready before she even finished reading. She wrote that they did not have time for my stupid, meaningless award. The wording was so sharp and so casual at the same time that for a second I thought I had read it wrong. Then my father reacted to her message with a thumbs up. No phone call. No question. No, are you serious? Just a thumbs up, like he was approving dinner plans. A few seconds later, my mother sent the final message. She said they would rather spend the evening together having a warm family dinner. I looked at the 3 responses lined up on my screen and felt the last little piece of confusion inside me die. It was not that they did not understand how important this was. It was that understanding had never been the issue. They simply did not value the things that mattered to me unless someone else told them they should. And in that moment, before the cameras, before the medal, before the headlines and apology calls and all the things that came later, I saw my family more clearly than I ever had in my life. I typed one word back. Understood. Then I locked my phone, set it face down on my desk, and went back to work with a calm so complete it almost scared me. Because when disappointment stops hurting, that usually means something in you has already moved on. Washington did not feel real to me at first. Even after the car passed the gates, even after I went through security, even after I stood in a room full of people whose work had changed industries, saved lives, and shaped the country in ways most Americans would never fully see, some part of me still felt like the girl from Indiana carrying an old laptop up the stairs because nobody downstairs cared enough to look. The White House staff moved with that polished calm that made everything feel both historic and strangely efficient. There were rehearsals, timing notes, handshakes, photographers, seating charts, and the kind of quiet formality that makes you sit a little straighter without even realizing it. I wore a navy dress my assistant had practically forced me to buy because she said I needed to stop dressing like I was headed into a data review meeting. I remember smoothing the fabric over my knees while I waited and thinking, of all the nights for my family to finally be absent, of course it would be this one. My team had come. A few agency officials I had worked with were there too. People who actually understood what this moment meant smiled at me with genuine warmth. But there was still an empty space in the back of my mind where my family should have been. Not because they deserved to be there, but because some wounds do not stop aching just because you know better. When my name was finally called, everything seemed to sharpen at once. I walked forward, hearing the sound of applause around me, but it was distant, almost underwater, compared to the pounding of my own heart. Then the president said my name clearly, confidently, and followed it with a description of the work I had spent years pouring myself into. He spoke about emergency response, about technology that helped communities act faster when roads became dangerous, and minutes could mean the difference between escape and tragedy. He said my work had helped strengthen public safety in moments of chaos, and hearing the value of my life's work stated out loud in that room, in that building, in front of those cameras, did something to me I still do not fully have words for. The metal rested heavier on my shoulders than I expected. Not physically, but emotionally. It felt like the weight of every ignored achievement, every lonely night, every small humiliation, every time I had been told in ways large and small that what I cared about was too technical, too serious, too invisible to matter. And yet there it was, impossible to dismiss now, shining under White House lights. Somewhere back in Indiana, while all of this was happening, my family was at dinner exactly where they had said they would be. My mother had chosen one of those upscale places she liked because the lighting was flattering and the wine list made her feel worldly. My father was probably relaxed for once, enjoying the comfort of a familiar table. My sister, no doubt, was talking with her hands, telling some long story about an event in Chicago or a campaign she thought would put her on another level. The kind of conversation they always made room for. The kind of life they always understood. Then, one of the televisions above the bar switched over to a national news cut in from Washington. A local station back in Indiana picked up the feed because a woman from Carmel was being honored at the White House that night. The anchor introduced me as an Indiana native whose technology had helped improve emergency routing and public safety response across multiple states. Then the screen filled with my face. I did not see their reactions in real time, of course, but I heard about them later from more than one source, which made me believe every detail. Sabrina went silent in the middle of a sentence. My mother slowly lowered her wine glass and stared up at the television like she had stopped understanding the room. My father, the man who had answered my invitation with a thumbs up to my sister's cruelty, apparently said absolutely nothing. And then the president appeared beside me on the screen and placed the medal around my neck, while the chyron beneath us identified me by name. The same name they had brushed aside just hours earlier. the same achievement they had called stupid and meaningless. People in the restaurant started looking from the television to their table and back again. Someone nearby recognized my last name and asked if they were related to me. Another person said they had just heard that my technology had helped emergency agencies during severe weather events and highway incidents. A waiter paused. A couple at the next table turned fully in their seats. There was nowhere for my family to hide from the truth of that moment. They had chosen to miss the biggest night of my life, and now strangers were witnessing their shock before they could even arrange their faces into something less embarrassing. After the ceremony ended, I stepped away from the crowd for a few quiet minutes and looked down at my phone. It was already vibrating with the beginning of what I knew was coming. But before I opened any of it, I went to the family group chat and sent a single message. "Thank you for giving me space tonight." The ceremony was beautiful. Then I attached a photo of myself standing beneath the lights with the metal visible against my dress and sent it without another word. I did not need to shame them. Reality had done that for me more completely than anger ever could. Then I locked my phone, slipped it back into my bag, and walked into the reception with a strange new feeling settling over me. It was not triumph exactly. It was not revenge in the dramatic way people imagine it. It was something quieter and better than that. It was the feeling of no longer needing people to understand your worth after the world has already made it undeniable. By the time I woke up the next morning, my phone looked like it had survived some kind of electrical storm. Missed calls, voicemails, text alerts, email notifications, messages from numbers I had not seen in years, all stacked on top of each other until my screen almost did not look like mine anymore. For a few quiet seconds, I just stared at it from the hotel bed with the curtains half open and the Washington sunlight cutting across the room. I knew exactly where most of it was coming from. What I did not know yet was how fast the shock had spread. My family group chat had gone from cold dismissal to total chaos overnight. My mother had sent a string of messages asking why I had not told them it was that important, which would have been laughable if it had not been so insulting. My father had written that they were proud of me, and that everything had happened so fast. Sabrina had sent 4 separate messages between midnight and 3 in the morning, each one sounding more desperate than the last. The first said she had not understood what kind of award it was. The second said she had been in complete shock at the restaurant. The third said people had started recognizing our family name immediately and asking questions. The fourth was just one sentence that somehow managed to sound both hysterical and self-pitying at the same time. "Penelope, please call me. This has turned into a disaster." I sat there reading that line twice because it told me more than any apology could have. Not "I hurt you." Not "I was cruel." Not "I cannot believe I missed your biggest night." A disaster. Meaning, the worst part, in her mind, was not what she had done to me. It was what had happened to her because other people saw it. That realization made it easier to put the phone down and get ready slowly. I showered, dressed, and went downstairs for coffee before I answered a single message. Somewhere between the first sip and the second, the headlines started finding me. Local Indianapolis stations had run the story all over their morning broadcasts. Hometown engineer honored at White House. Indiana woman recognized for life-saving public safety technology. Photos of me with the medal were everywhere. Former teachers had posted about me. People from Stanford had reshared the clip. Transportation officials and emergency planners I had worked with were tagging the company and congratulating my team. The story had escaped the limits of my field and become something broader, something ordinary people could understand. A woman from Indiana had built technology that helped protect lives in moments of danger, and the president had honored her for it. That was simple enough for anyone to respect. Unfortunately for my sister, people online are very good at connecting dots when humiliation is involved. Sabrina had spent years building a life around visibility. She posted constantly, curated every angle, shared every dinner, every event, every gift basket, every polished fragment of a life designed to make strangers envy her. But visibility is only flattering when the spotlight lands where you want it to. Sometime that morning, one of the women who had been in the restaurant the night before posted about the moment my family saw me on television. She did not even name them at first. She just wrote about sitting near a table that went dead silent after dismissing a family member's award, only to realize that same family member was at the White House receiving a medal from the president. It spread faster than it should have, probably because people love stories that punish arrogance without any help from fiction. Then someone else recognized my sister from her public account. Then another person found an old clip of Sabrina joking on a panel that people who turn their achievements into their whole personality are exhausting and insecure. It was not about me directly, but beside the news coverage and the restaurant story, it looked ugly enough to do damage. By noon, one of her brand partners had announced a pause in their campaign with her. By that afternoon, an event she had been promoting in Chicago quietly removed her from its guest lineup. Her manager stopped returning calls right away, which in her world was the equivalent of hearing a fire alarm. The comments under her latest posts became brutal. Some people called her shallow. Some called her jealous. Some said the cruelest thing was not that she had insulted me, but that she had insulted work that actually helped save lives. For once, the internet was not exaggerating. It had simply seen her clearly. My parents were not handling it any better. People they knew had already started calling. Church friends, neighbors, people from my father's business circle, women my mother lunched with and tried to impress, all of them suddenly full of questions. Why were they not in Washington? Why had they missed it? Had they known? Were they close with me now? It was amazing how quickly they went from indifference to panic once the outside world started measuring them against the daughter they had failed to value. Around lunchtime, I finally answered my mother's call. She burst into tears within the first 30 seconds and kept saying they had no idea, that they never imagined it would be shown everywhere, that the whole thing had happened so unexpectedly. I let her talk until she ran out of excuses and had to sit in the silence she had earned. Then I asked her one simple question. What part did you not understand? The part where I said it was the biggest night of my life, or the part where I asked you to come? She had no real answer to that. My father got on the line and tried to sound steady, tried to make it about misunderstanding and timing, but even he could not hide the embarrassment in his voice. He said they were proud of me. He said they wanted to make it right. I told him something I had never said out loud before. I am not upset that you made a choice. I am upset that you made the same choice over and over for years, and this is just the first time other people happen to be watching. He did not respond for several seconds. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it. Then my sister called. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. Sabrina was crying hard enough that I could barely understand her at first. She said brands were backing away. She said people were destroying her online. She said she was sorry, that she had been stupid, that she had no idea this would turn into something so huge. Again, there it was. Not sorrow first, consequences first. I listened until she ran out of breath, and then I told her the truth as calmly as I could. This did not become huge overnight. It was always huge. You just decided it was meaningless because it mattered to me instead of you. She started crying harder after that. The kind of crying people do when they realize their own words are going to follow them longer than they expected. I did not comfort her. I did not attack her either. I just let the silence sit there until she had to feel it. Over the next 2 weeks, things kept unraveling for her in slow, ugly steps. Another partnership stalled. The Chicago event circuit that used to invite her everywhere suddenly felt less welcoming. Her manager advised her to step back from public appearances until the backlash cooled. Without the same steady income, the apartment she had stretched herself to afford started becoming impossible to justify. Eventually, she gave up the lease and moved back in with our parents, which was the kind of fall from grace she would have mocked in somebody else 6 months earlier. People later tried to frame all of it as my revenge, but that was never true. I did not leak anything. I did not call anyone. I did not have to. The punishment was built into the moment itself. She publicly revealed exactly what kind of person she was, and the world made its own judgment. That was the part she never saw coming. She thought influence meant control. She thought attention could always be managed. She had no idea how fast the spotlight could turn when it finally landed on something real. And me, the sister she had spent years treating like background noise, had become the one thing nobody in the family could look away from anymore. 3 weeks after the ceremony, Sabrina came to see me in Denver. She looked nothing like the woman who had mocked me so easily. No designer outfit, no polished smile, no confidence. Just red eyes, trembling hands, and a voice that kept breaking every time she tried to say my name. She told me everything had fallen apart. More brand deals were gone. Her management company had dropped her. Event invitations had disappeared. She had lost her apartment in Chicago and moved back in with our parents in Indiana. She kept saying she had lost everything because of one stupid sentence. But the truth was, it was never just one sentence. That sentence only revealed the kind of person she had been choosing to become for years. For the first time in her life, people saw past the image and into the emptiness underneath it. She admitted she had always felt threatened by me because I had something she could never fake. I had substance. I had discipline. I had built something real. I told her I heard her apology, but being sorry after losing everything was not the same as having good character. I did not yell. I did not comfort her either. I just let her sit with the truth she had spent years avoiding. 2 days later, my parents came too. My mother cried before she even sat down. My father looked like a man who had finally understood how many years he had wasted praising what was easy and ignoring what was real. They admitted they had always chosen what looked impressive on the outside. My mother said she loved what was easy to celebrate. My father admitted he had tuned me out because my world made him feel ignorant, and instead of learning, he chose comfort. They asked if we could start over. I told them I did not hate them, but I was no longer willing to pretend the past had been a misunderstanding. They had shown me, again and again, exactly where I stood. Just because they were ready to value me now did not mean they were entitled to immediate access to the life I built without them. Around that same time, I accepted an offer to become Chief Technology Officer at a national infrastructure and emergency systems company in Austin. It was the biggest opportunity of my life, with a larger team, a national mission, and the kind of future I had once dreamed about alone in silence. I moved into a new home, and in my office I hung 3 things on the wall: my Stanford degree, a photo of my team, and the medal from the White House. Not because I needed proof for anyone else, but because I wanted to remember what becomes possible when you stop asking the wrong people to see your worth. As for my sister, the price she paid was far heavier than embarrassment. The internet moved on, but her industry did not. Her name was now attached to the moment she mocked work that had helped save lives. Serious brands would not touch her. Her apology videos failed. Her rebrand attempts failed. Even our parents eventually stopped trying to bankroll her comeback. In the end, she took a part-time job at a home decor store outside Indianapolis, helping strangers furnish houses while living back in the bedroom she thought she had outgrown years ago. That was the real punishment. Not just losing money or status, but losing the illusion she had built her whole identity on. In the end, my revenge was never destroying her. It was refusing to stay small so she could keep feeling big. If my story means anything, it is this: the people closest to you can overlook you, dismiss you, and fail to understand you for years. But their blindness does not define your value. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is keep building, keep rising, and keep going until the truth of who you are becomes too undeniable for anyone to ignore. And when that day comes, do not waste it begging for late love from people who only noticed you after the applause. Choose your future, protect your peace, and never again let someone else decide how much you are worth. At Revenge Argon, our team works hard to create meaningful and engaging stories that leave a lasting impact. We are committed to making it clear that these are fictional stories, created to share educational lessons, emotional insights, and valuable life messages with our audience. The villain in this story was not just cruel, but blinded by jealousy, pride, and shallow judgment. She dismissed something truly meaningful because she could not recognize value beyond attention and appearance. If you were in Penelope's place, how would you deal with a person like that? And would you ever give her a second chance?